Hi everyone, so today I wanted to share this layout with you. This has been inspired by a video that Shimelle did a little while ago that talked about how to use layers effectively. I'm just showing you all the supplies that I've pulled out to create the layout. I don't end up using some of them, but I'll tell you as I go through which ones I'm using and where they come from. So the background paper I'm using is from Shimelle's Starshine collection, and I'm just using some Mr. Huey's Mist in silver to just create an interest on the diagonal and just sort of draw your eye from the top left to the bottom right. And then I'm just going to pop that aside while I create some of the layers to go behind the photo. This month the Mercy Tiara Facebook challenge is talking all about boy layouts. So it started that I pulled out a whole heap of boy supplies and decided that Shimelle's idea of layers would work well for this particular photo using this particular background. So it's sort of been inspired by two different avenues, and yeah, I will share with you the links to both of those, the challenge and also the Shimelle's video in the comments below. So if you want to have a look at those, you can click the links. So I'm just starting to create these layers, and I've put some vellum behind the photo just to soften the background to the photo, and then the next layer behind that is actually going to be this paper you can see me cutting now, which is a basic grey paper from their Soleil collection, and just adhering that to the background. So it's sort of a tone-on-tone blue, and it's got a sort of diamond pattern with lines through it. So it's a sort of very it's not a very bold pattern at all. It's kind of blends into the background a little bit, but it is quite a pretty pattern, and one that's good for matting photos. And then I've got this plain blue piece of paper from a paper company called Stamp It. One side's got sort of again tone-on-tone blue with swirls, and the other side's just a plain blue. And I was toying with the idea of using the swirl background, but I decided to go with just the plain background because the swirl would introduce another tone of blue, and I already had a lot of blue, different blues going on. So just to soften that background paper, which is quite dark, I decided to add another layer of vellum there, and I just start layering that up with those different pieces. I've got a chipboard frame from Heidi Swap, and it says "Have a nice day," so that's what I was showing you there, and I end up using that as part of the embellishment. So just starting to layer those pieces down, and that's where I sort of had a look at that side and decided no, I wanted to turn it over and use the other side, and then adding the photo that I've matted onto those layers. So the idea behind the layers of the photo is that they are on an angle, but the photo ends up being straight, so it just creates a bit of interest behind that photo. And because we've got all these soft layers behind the photo, and the photo itself is quite dark and the background paper is quite dark, I think it helps to bring that photo out of the background and really make it stand out. So I'm quite happy with the way that ends up looking. I've got a die cut piece of cardstock. You can see that word "lovely" there. That's from the Heidi Swap scripted words, and she's got quite a few in this collection. And then I've also got those globes from the Starshine collection that I'm actually wanting to use on this layout. I pulled it out to use as embellishments and was going to cut out 3 of them, but once I do actually have a look at that, I decide that one is quite large and one is probably enough. So I'm just looking at the other cut apart sheets from Shimelle's latest Starshine, and having a look at what I could include from there as well. I was looking at that Shine Brightly and toying with the idea of adding some other colours into this, because at the moment it's very much different tones of blue, but I decide that I'm just going to go with the globe at this stage and see how that looks. So I do apologise, but I think you'll see me cutting this out off screen. Yeah, I really sort of didn't think that I was off screen, but obviously I was. And then I just sort of roughly cut it so I can get an idea of, yes, am I going to include that? How am I going to include it? Moving it around a little bit, and I think it looks too big down the bottom with the photo frame, and decide I need to actually trim it down to see exactly where it will go. So just fussy cutting that out now. And yeah, basically looking at how I can embellish 3 different areas. I do end up doing 3 different areas, but the embellishment is quite spread out compared to the way that I would usually embellish, which is sort of pretty much on top of layers on top of each other. I'm sort of spreading out the layers a little bit more, and that's sort of that idea that Shimelle had about creating layers, but creating interest in different textures and different motifs, and each of the areas of embellishment end up with very common themes as well, but they do look very different. So you can see I've got the clouds there, so each of the areas end up with a cloud, yeah, I decided to go with just the one globe, and I've got those little stars there as well. So those clouds and stars come from an Amy 10 set of dies, and I've just decided to, the clouds are on a white cardstock that has some glittery circles on them, so that creates a little bit of interest on the layout, and then the stars are just from silver glittery paper that I had. So decide that I am going to use one of the die cuts from the cut apart sheet, and that's that dream there, which I decide to use down the bottom, and then I just start adding those clouds and stars into the different places, and I'm starting to get a feel for how I want this layout to turn out. So just adding some of those stars and having a look at where that placement is best going to be. I do go back to the cut apart sheets and think, do I want to add anything else? But I can tell you now that I don't end up adding anything else from it, and I decide to just put those aside and move on from that. So yeah, just really playing around with the placement a little bit. I had a strip of paper from, it was a branding strip, and so I've decided, you know, I don't want to use that, but I was trying my best to add those layers that we talked about. So I end up with these little word phrases as well that come from one of the papers in the Starshine collection, and I've cut out some dark blue and light blue ones there. So each of the clusters ends up with a cloud, some light blue, some dark blue, and one of the stars, and then, you know, they're very different in the rest of it, the idea, but there are some commonalities as well. So it comes together quite well at the end. Just looking at the placement, and before I stick any of the embellishment down, I just want to make sure I'm happy with where everything is, and that word die ends up forming part of the title for the page, which is lovely. So or it is the title for the page, and then there's some wording underneath. I can't remember what it says, but it's quite fitting for the photo. So just using some adhesive there to dimensional adhesive to mount that globe, and it's because it's quite a big piece, I've used quite a thin dimensional adhesive, and just sticking that down, and that's where I decide that's going to go. So you can see the layout ends up just being blues, different blues, except for the green on that globe. That's the only sort of colour, and you know, normally I'd feel like I need to add some green somewhere else to make it balance out, but I think it works really well on this particular layout. And then just adding some dimensional adhesive to that phrase there as well. And then with that lovely die cut, I find the best way to adhere those really fine die cuts is to use the dot runner adhesive, and I just put some paper in the background. And then any of the dots that go off the wording sticks to the paper, but you get good coverage behind the words. So I see a lot of people use wet glue to adhere sort of fine things like that. I think there's the Tombow Mono Multi glue must have a really fine tip on it, but I tend to use the dot runner adhesive, and then you can always lift it up and add a little bit more if you need to in places where the word is lifting off. And I think it works well too because I've got that vellum in the background. Any wet glue might warp the vellum, so it's good to use something that's a little bit more tacky so that it doesn't actually warp the vellum. So I end up happy with that embellishment area at the top, and now just starting to look at adding the embellishments down the bottom. One of the beauties of having the vellum in the layers is that you can create a bit of interest with your embellishment, and so that cloud there ends up underneath one of the layers of vellum. And you know, certain things end up over the top of the layers of vellum as well, so it does help with that layering effect. Now I'm looking at this third cluster and I'm not happy with the plain blue behind the frame. There's no other sort of plain papers in the layout at all, and I just think it sort of stood out too much and didn't fit in with the rest of the layout. So I decided to go ahead and add some of that silver Mr. Huey's that I used at the beginning on the paper there. And I also wanted to have some white splatters across there, but I don't have a white mist, so I end up grabbing out my Dilutions paint in white, and I just water it down so it ends up being a bit more liquidy, and I can then splatter that off the paintbrush and onto the page as well. So just take a bit off the lid there and end up watering it down on my craft mat, and then being able to splatter that onto the light blue, and then I carry it over to the dark blue as well, so it sort of seems like it's, you know, blending into the background, and it has that starry looking effect that the rest of the background paper does. And I decided I've got a little bit more paint, so I should probably create that interest at the top as well. So again, going back to that diagonal of your eye naturally looking from the top left and going down to the bottom right and crossing the photo as you go, so draws your eye sort of to that main area where the photo and the embellishment and everything is. So just now looking at adding that frame back, I didn't really give it much of a chance to dry, but so I'm kind of careful about how I end up putting that frame back down again, just adding one of those word phrases at the underneath dream, and then going back to that last place of embellishment there and looking at the word phrase there. So I decided to add a light blue one to the dark blue frame, whereas the other two areas have the dark blue on the sort of paler background, and I think that works out okay. So even though it's not exactly the same, because I've got the dark blue in each area and the light blue in each area, it still manages to come together well. So just put that frame on a bit of an angle, and then adding those clouds again into that clustered area, and looking at that star as well and adding that silver glittery star to that area, and yeah, decide that I'm quite happy with how that looks, and just need to try to add the other cloud and decide that it's not going to work, and then feel like it's missing something, so I go looking for my enamel dots and looking at the I was trying to decide what colour again. Do I add the green, which comes from the green and the globe, or do I go with the blue? And I had two different colours of blue there, so I was trying to figure out which colour of blue would fit best and try them in each area of embellishment to decide which one would work well across all three. And then I decided to go with the one that I've only got 3 for in that sheet that you can see me with there. So I go and open up another packet and use the rest from that packet as well. So I tend to, when I purchase them, especially these ones, they were a great buy. I bought a couple of packets in my favourite colours, and I'll only open up the new packet once I've exhausted one of the colours that I'm using. So I used all 3 there, and adding a bit of dimension to, or a bit of interest, I guess, a different texture to each of those embellishment areas. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe to my channel. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. I'm interested to hear whether you are enjoying the voiceovers or you'd prefer for me to talk as I scrap, which is what I started out doing. But yeah, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and yeah, I'll include those links below to the challenge that I was talking about and also to Shimelle's page. I hope you enjoyed this video, and just a quick close-up, and I'll show you some still shots at the end. Thanks for watching.